So good morning, everyone. This is Python 101. And in order to wait for a few minutes in case others wants to arrive, I will start with a few introductory words about Python and why it's a good stuff and why you should try to start using it. Well, first, it's currently one of the first most used package in the world. Depending on the poll, you see it's sometimes number 1, number 2, never below number 3, so it's always on the podium. And the challengers are usually C or Java or JavaScript. And honestly, if you try one of those, yeah, Python is much easier, which is the second point I wanted to stress out. It's very, very easy to write down things in Python. The Hello World exercise, it's just a one-liner against 20 full. So of course you will not see that in this first session, but in the sessions that comes, you will see how to evolve the way you code in order to be able to produce packages that are as advanced as you want. And you can publish them so everyone in the world can download them and use them. So it's kind of very gratifying to be able to do that. And maybe it's linked because it's a popular language, but you have a huge ecosystem with lots of packages. Stack Overflow. So whenever you have an issue, honestly, 95% of the time you will find the answer just by Googling it, going to Stack Overflow, and bam, you have a one-liner to solve the issue. And of course, in terms of packages, so you've got, for instance, many of you want to do a machine learning stuff, and Python is the language to use if you want to do that, because all have shipped with a Python front end to be able to use them inside Python. And some esoteric stuff, so I don't make a list, but I know that some people do very specific things with symbolic computations, so sometimes you need you can add this on Python. So why not go to Python? Well, Python is a language that is interpreted, which means that you have, when you write a code, the Python language has to understand on the fly what you meant. And because of that, it can be slow. So it would be slower, but if you do something in Java or in C, you can learn how to mitigate that. But yes, obviously, if the best top world performance is what you seek, Python will not be able to achieve that. You may have a factor 2 of loss compared to the best available implementation. But factor 2 is not that bad. So yeah. Sometimes it's very, very rare that you may need very specific computing or language features that is not available in Python. I don't even have an example in mind. Just a question on the bridge. Is the sound better now? Do you hear us? Do you hear me? Yes. Okay, great. Great. Okay, so that was the point of having a very useless slides before starting the real stuff. So in case, you want me to switch to HDMI on my computer?
Non, it's okay.
Okay.
Tant pis, c'est pas grave. De toute façon, là, tout le monde peut se connecter.
Okay, great.
Recording in progress.
No.
Vous voulez vérifier
One.
que...
One, two.
Non, visiblement.
One, two. One, two. Okay, back to business. So like I said, there are some reasons you don't want to go to Python, but honestly, there's not so many of them. So my advice is please give it a try, if it's the purpose of this tutorial. Okay. Another elephant I want to clear from the room before we start is about Python version 2 against Python version 3. So it's a thing from the past. In the past, they made some very big changes, like code-breaking changes when that goes from Python 2 to Python 3. And because of that, many big softwares decided to stick to Python 2 because it was easier than to have to rewrite all the codes. And it created a kind of Okay, so it's kind of forked between the Python 2 branch, but still continued to evolve in some way, and the Python 3. And so this is this historical reasons that resulted in having two versions of Python used today. If you're here, it's because you begin in Python, and so it's very simple for you. Only Python 3 exists. So period. You don't want to be involved in anything related to Python 2. Python 2 is the old ways. Now we have the new ways, Python 3, Python 4, definitely. And so avoid it as you can. Sometimes when you go on Stack Overflow and Stack Exchange, you will have an answer from years ago that was written for Python 2. You may find useful intel in that answer, but always treat it with care because it may be totally unrelated with the way to solve it with Python 3. So Python 3, Python 3, Python 3, 3 times. Okay. You continue doing things, but I should be okay on the Zoom.
Yeah.
So now we're starting slowly to enter the core of this tutorial, how to program in Python. Well, basically, you've got three main possibilities. Don't hesitate to correct me if I'm wrong, to interact with Python. The most straightforward is to use what is called a Python interpreter. So like it's a command line where you enter commands that are executed. It's very useful if you want to check things very fast, like, okay, does it work? Is that package installed or not? So, but otherwise, you should never use that. It's really limited to very, very few use cases. Then the main approach is to just write a Python file. So it's a kind of script that will be executed when you run it. And this is probably the primary way to do things in Python. You can do everything with that, from small scripts that will be used in a cron to update things on a website, to building very huge packages. At the core of that, it's always PyFile. And then the thing that we may be more interested in today is to use what is called an interactive Python session.
And you've got many ways to do that, but the thing that we work on today is called the notebooks. And it's an intermediate between the interpreter, where you just write down commands and they're executed, and the PI files, where you can do more elaborate things. So it's kind of the middleman, where you can be very interactive, create parts of codes, execute them, check if it's right, change things, re-execute again. So it's a good intermediate. And for me, it's very, very great when you want to create new things. Because you can play with your code, you can test it on the fly, you check, change, do things very, very dirty. And when you're in creative mode, for me, a Jupyter Notebook, it's great. Okay, so how to program in Python, steps 2. So how you do this? Well, you need to have Python installed. And for that, you need to have a Python distribution. And you need to have some way to write down your code. You have many possibilities available. You can do in Emacs if you want, because it's not coffee, so you can do that with Emacs. With Vi, I know some people who do this with AI, no problem. But here, I will force you into 2 specific choices, which are Jupyter Notebook for the interactive Python and a PyCharm for the Py files. Also, we might not have time for PyCharm, but if we go for Jupyter Notebook, that should be enough for today. Okay, so installation time. This is the part where we probably will waste for a few minutes. Okay, so we will use one specific Python distribution, which is called Anaconda. So you've got the link, to download it there. It's also on the invitation to the session, or in the guest that François proposed you to visit. And so your first exercise, if you don't have any Python installation, is to download this, if you haven't done that already, and install it on your system. Just while you do this, I will tell you a few things. So I decided to present you Anaconda because it's an all-in-one solution that embeds most of the packages or most of the things you need for use it. Very easy to install. And you can install it directly on your user account. So you don't need to be root to do that. And if you mess up, it's only on user account to just remove one directory or uninstall it. And it's very easy to do that. It's a little bit heavy, 400 megabytes, but yeah, today it's something that everyone should be able to afford. It's very easy to break an Anaconda distribution if you're too experimental with the way you install or disinstall, uninstall packages. But then again, it's very easy to install that again. And yes, if you change if you want to switch from one Python version to another, say you're 3.7 and you want to go 3.8 or 3.9, basically the easiest way to do that is to uninstall your previous version and install a new one. But like I said, it's very easy to do this. Just a few things. I suppose you're currently trying to download things and install this. So it's better, and the system installer will tell you that, not to have space in the path that leads to your Anaconda installation. So for instance, if you're a Windows user and you decided to have spaces in the name of your home directory, you may get into trouble, and it would be best maybe to install Anaconda somewhere else in your hard drive to avoid that kind of thing. Because most of packages will come with spaces, but some won't, and you will not know which ones until you bump into them, and it will be too late after that. Another tip, at some point, Anaconda will ask you if you want to add its binary executables into the path, and it will recommend you not to do that. And I will recommend you do that. Do that because the circumstances where it's a bad idea are mostly for advanced users. If you're a beginner and if you don't have any Python installation already on the system, or you don't know right, do that. So install Anaconda on your path, so it will be able to be executed. Maybe I will pause here and wait about the feedbacks we have on the chat. So this is the part where I ask.
I don't see any question on the chat for the moment. Maybe just a small remark for the people who already have Anaconda on their system. You can have a look at the web page of the session. So on the links website, so there's also a link in the invitation email. So you can already look at what comes next in the session. Try and play.
Yeah, I probably can show that.
Yes.
Sorry. If you go there. Yeah, for those who wants to take some advance, so here you will have the content of a practical. And you can go on GitHub to have it directly available like this if you want. Okay. Going back to the presentation and checking. Sorry. Yes. Okay, so the chat seems to be very low. Maybe we could ask for people to say when they have a working Anaconda distribution. Just the way to see if you're okay for the next is typically to start a command line. So if your Windows, it's like this. And if all goes well, if you write Python, you should have something like this. So this is the Python interpreter. So you see I'm a 3.8.11. So if you can do this, it should be similar things on Linux, I think. That means that you've passed the installation step.
No, I was just looking at the chat.
Yeah.
I was not looking at you. Sinon, est-ce qu'on demande aux gens qui n'ont pas encore d'Anaconda fonctionnel de lever la main?
Yeah, that's a possibility. So if someone is not able to run Python interpreter, can he or she tell? It's takes times. Yes. It's okay. Just if you want to play with the interpreter, once you're there, you just have to, you can write commands and it works. How do I do that?
Pas contrôle molette, je sais que ça marche. Mais... Est-ce que tu fais Zoom avec le touchpad?
I tried, but like this.
Ouais, c'est pas mal ça.
Whoa. Mieux comme ça quand même. Okay.
Enlist from French.
Yeah. It's okay if you don't understand the last line yet. No problem. It was just to
Quite understandable. The full point.
Yes. I'm all good. When it's planned, I can't see it. It's 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks from now. Sorry.
Yes. So no, it's not a silly question.
No. Don't register to Nucleus, please.
So Fabien answered Barbara, so you don't need to register to Nucleus. And for David's question, so the sessions are every 3 weeks. So next session is in 3 weeks. And generally, I send the invite in the week before the session. So very often it's the Friday before the session that I send the invite, more or less. There is a margin of uncertainty on that.
So Barbara, did you select add Anaconda to path when you made the installation?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And when you enter a command line and you write Python like I did, it does not work?
No, I will make another try, but
it's important that you start after the installation of the command line. If you start from an existing command line, the path is not updated for that interpreter. So really, it's really start.
Okay, that was the problem. I restarted the window and now it works.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
I will also, just for completeness, give you a view of the Anaconda Navigator. So it's an option that you have after you install Anaconda. You should have somewhere an application called Anaconda Navigator. And if you want, you can launch that. And basically, after some time, and maybe 1 gigabyte of memory usage, still loading. Yeah, very light, very light. Okay, where are you? Oh yes, it's there. Okay, you've got this interface. So basically, it's a way to launch all the main applications that are shipped with Anaconda. So for instance, you can have direct access to, so there is something there which is called an environment, but basically it's just a command where you're sure that Python is available. Jupyter Notebook will go there. So you've got a lot of tools that you will be able to use if you want to. For instance, Jupyter Notebook is what we'll use today, and maybe Jupyter Lab as well. So if you want a very simple solution to have nice shortcuts, you can use this. Honestly, my personal recommendation, so okay, it's for beginners, but the trade-off between the heaviness of the solution and what it brings back to you, for me, even for beginners, is not worth it. So I don't really discourage you to use that if you're comfortable with it, but no, probably not worth the effort. Okay, updating. Maybe I would like your advice, François.
Yes, I think
we should do the update.
Yes, I guess so.
Okay.
Because most of people in the room anyway, they already have to date, and for people on the bridge, it's not really a problem.
Yeah. So about updating, so you need to do that because Python package always evolves. But updating is the best way to break a Python distribution. Why are you laughing, Quentin? That prevents you of anything. Yeah. And the paradox is that the best moment to update your packages is just on a fresh install. So you will say, yes, but if it's a fresh install, it's all up to date. No. When you've got a fresh install, that means the package were up to date when the distribution was built. And usually it's like 3 to 6 months before the moment where you do your installation. So even if you've got the latest Anaconda distribution, it will never be up to date with the current state of the packages. And so it's a good thing to update things. And now you will say, how do we update things? Well, here's kind of tricky part because you've got many ways to deal with package maintenance in Python. You can do this directly inside your OS. For instance, I know that Debian users directly use apt-get and things like that. Conda provides its own way of managing packages, which is called Anaconda. So Anaconda provides its way of managing packages, and it's called Conda. Most of the time, people will talk to you about PIP, which is a kind of most universal manager for Python. And so it's pretty difficult sometimes to decide which way you should use. I will give you a recommendation, especially for beginners. So if it's something related to your core Conda distribution, for instance, Jupyter notebooks or things like that, I recommend you stick to the Conda manager because it will be easier to ensure you will not break things inside your core Python distribution, Conda distribution. And for all other purposes, like for any type of technical package or something like that, I recommend to use pip because it's faster, easier. Yes. Yeah.
There is somebody who is raising his hand, Boubacar. You want to say something?
Yeah, you can.
Yes, I want to say something.
Yes.
Go. Okay. After I installed the Anaconda on my PC, when I start the prompt, the Anaconda PowerShell prompt,
yeah,
I'm unable to print the hello world. So I want you to assist me to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we send someone to do this?
Maxime, moi j'ai pas de voilà.
Because can you explain exactly what's your issue?
Okay. So during my installation process,
yeah,
the installer told me that I have a space in my folder name. So I changed the folder to the user public. I'm using the Windows OS.
Yeah.
So I do that. But after I start the shell to do things to try to do what you have been saying.
Yeah.
So I saw that they told me enable to initialize device PRN. I don't know what that means.
No. This seems to be a technical question that I cannot answer on the fly. So, okay, so enable to install device PNR?
Yes, enable to initialize device PRN. I don't know what that means.
So I will ask someone. So, Maxime, you handle the case?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So I will follow the tutorial, the session, and maybe after that I will do some search on Google to see that if I can.
But don't worry, Maxime will speak to you on the chat, and he will try to get that with you.
Okay. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. So back to the update. So now what I'll ask you to do is, like usual, to start a command line and to do the Conda updates, which is a two-step part. The first part is Conda update Conda, which is basically trying to ask the manager to get to the best version of itself. So me, it will probably do nothing because I tested that yesterday. So the chances that he has to update things are low, but not zero. Okay, so here is saying he's happy, but for you, you may have a prompt saying, okay, I need to update this. So you say yes, and you wait for the installation to be completed. And when this is done, so Conda update all. So this, for me, will probably take no time because it's all up to date, hopefully. And the answer is? Oh, yes. So it's just a channel thing. You don't need to know the exact details, but okay, I've got one package too. So for me, it was easy because I did the update yesterday night. For you, it will probably take a while. I respect a few minutes.
No, you are dealing with the Boubacar's question.
Okay. Conda is not recognized as an internal or external demand from Moyad. Smells like someone who didn't add Anaconda to path in the installation, I guess. Probably. Yeah. So Moyad, I believe that when you did the installation, yeah. Okay, so Marco is ending that. Moyad, yes, you selected to add or you didn't? Yeah. Downgraded is okay. Don't worry about that. It's just that because you've got multiple, it's called channels. And for instance, I don't know if you see, I don't know if I can see, but yeah. This is in fact the same version from two distinct channels. And because of that, he got the feeling that it's a downgrade, but it's not. So don't worry, you can downgrade without any issue. Boubacar, okay, that's been solved. Yes. Thanks for everyone for helping in the chat. Okay, so for regular people, you will probably need to, yes, I think NumPy needs a full revamp, sklearn needs a full revamp. There's something called MKL, which is 100 megabytes. So we still will wait maybe a couple of minutes. Yes. Like Maxime said, I just presented you the navigator for completeness because Anaconda pushes you to use that, but no, it's really useless. It's my personal opinion. Yes. Is the Conda update process a rolling base update? Not sure to fully understand. It's a technical term. Rolling base. It's a continuous process. Yeah.
If they are like discrete, like Ubuntu, for example, is discrete with like April and October each year that being released, or is it continuous update?
So for the Conda, the distribution executable that you download, it's kind of a periodic update. Like I said, 2 to 4 updates per year. And then for the packages, it depends on the channel. For the official Anaconda channel, I believe it's continuous, but with some delay. They want to be sure that the package is safe because they update it. And then you've got unofficial channels or semi-official channels like the Conda Forge where it's more up to date. So actually, it's like a mini distribution, like a Debian. So you can go the safe way with the official distribution, but most of the time you may want to use a more advanced channel to be able to have the latest features at your own risk.
I think that you can go ahead, Fabien.
Okay, so it's the time where you will start your first Jupyter notebook. So you in the command prompt or in any prompter, and if you type this, so we'll have some things that will appear, and clack, you should have this that opens in your navigator. So this is the main Jupyter Notebook interface. So basically, it's a kind of a file explorer. You see files, blah, blah, blah. And you can click on directory. You can do pretty much, for instance, documents. And you see that sometimes you've got some files with this notebook pictures and the IPyNB extension. Those are Jupyter notebooks. So these are some existing notebooks, but this is your first doc. You will try to create a new notebook, and you've got to tell the language that the notebook uses, because actually Jupyter notebooks are not only for Python. You can have Julia notebooks, you can have JavaScript notebooks. For all interpreted languages, you can have a notebook for that. But here it's Python, free, of course. So, ta-da! So this is your first notebook. Is everyone on board? Is everyone able to start the first notebook? So like I said, command line, Jupyter Notebook. It should start a session on the navigator. Not yet, still updating. Yes, I know the update. So for this part, I'll basically switch between the presentation and the notebook. So blah, blah, blah. So this is mainly for me. Okay. So the structure of a notebook, it's something which is very, very simple. It's just a list of cells. And a cell is a base unit of content. And when you start a notebook, you start it with one cell, this one. And you see that it's a cell because it's surrounded by a square.
Ou tu peux répondre je vais peut-être le dire. T'as pas besoin si c'est Anaconda.
If it's Anaconda, yes, Jupyter. Yeah. Marc Olivier, Jupyter Notebook is already shipped with Anaconda distribution. So you don't have to install anything. It's already been installed after you started your Anaconda distribution. No problem. Repeating is the way of being pedagogic.
I wanted also to write it down.
Okay, so this is a cell. Here, so you will see how to do that. I create another cell, and you have three types of cell. A first type of cell is called a row cell. How you make them, I will explain that later. I just write it down for completeness because it's one of the three types of cell in notebook. Honestly, you will never use that. So you should know that it exists. And yeah. Then you've got the markdown cell. So the markdown cell is where you enter some nice expression. So you've got a very specific syntax. For instance, here, you know, I'm using a single star to make things italic, double stars to make things bold. And you see And this is a code cell. So this is where you write down some Python. So the famous print. So you saw me create new cells, you saw me execute things, and maybe you didn't saw exactly how I did that. So now I will explain this to you. Okay, so when you're in Jupyter, it's very important to understand that you have two modes. You have the command mode and the edit mode. And the difference is very simple. In command mode, you manipulate the cells. You create new cells, you move cells, you copy paste some cells, you do things really at the notebook level. And when you're in edit mode, it's always inside a single cell, and you basically building, shaping, writing down what you want to make for that cell. So basically, when you're in command mode, you will see always blue box or blue boxes. When you do this, you just have to hit blah, 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 blah. Just I read this from me and I will just show you there. Okay, so this is the part where I'll do this. So here I am in command mode because this box is blue and I can go up and down to select a given cell. When I want to edit a cell, I go there, I hit enter. And as you see, I am now in edit mode. And now the box is green, which reminds me that I am editing something. And if you want to go back to the command mode, you can use ESC. So here I'm in command mode, but as you see, the cell is not interpreted because, yes, control enter, but I will explain that later. So you navigate in blue mode, the command mode, you enter by hitting enter, and you exit/execute by hitting control enter. And you see I'm blue again. Okay, so this is the base. And now you have a lot of other things, a lot of other shortcuts. And to access them, so you need to be in command mode like this, blue, and you hit the KH. And you will see the list of all available shortcuts. So my recommendation is that I believe that each shortcut is useful to at least a big proportion of people. I don't use all the shortcuts, but the shortcuts I don't use, some people may have interest in using them. So my recommendation is when you've got time, don't hesitate to browse all the shortcuts to see what they're doing and experiment and see if you like them or not. So for instance, me, I'm using a lot the shortcut B, which create a new cell below. So it creates a new cell below your current cell. Sometimes you may want to create a new cell above, and it's A. Of course, sometimes I create a cell and I don't want to, so I will delete that cell by hitting twice the letter D. DD.
X is enough.
Yes, but X is a cut, like cut and paste.
Just need to hit one key.
Yeah, but it's not Pythonic to use cut if you want to delete. Of course, the touch Z in command mode should be able to undo your last action. So like for français, if I hit X, it will delete the things. So you see there's a lot of shortcuts. They're very useful. That make it very easy to build up a very long notebook, too long sometimes, but it's very easy to add cells, update them. And we just switch back to presentation to see, okay, play with the shortcuts. Don't hesitate. This is interactive. So if already you can also use the mouse if you prefer. Yes, and we go into that. Don't worry, Marco. Blah, blah, blah. So for instance, I talked to you about row cells, and the command, the keyboard R turns your current cell into a row cell. So this is how I did earlier. Where is it? Blah, blah, blah. So for instance, here, if I hit R in command mode, this is now a row cell. That means that it contains something that will be used for nothing. The markdown cells. So the command to turning something into a markdown is M. And like I said, it's used to enter very nice things. So maybe I will copy things up because I'm a lazy person. So I will create a new cell, turn that into a markdown cell by hitting M. And then I will enter some text, very fast typer. It's just to give you not an exhaustive list, but a glimpse of what you can do with Markdown. So if you want to build list, you just start things with a dash, and it will turn into a list. By adding spaces, two spaces, for instance, you can make sublist. Yes, I will try to do that. So you see, this is a sublist. Another important, if instead of a dash, you enter a number and a point, you will create a numbered sublist. And as you see, it doesn't matter if you've got the numbering right, because it will automatically be translated into the proper numbering. So yeah, if you want to be silly, you can make write done run everywhere if you want to.
Can you also use the sharp symbol like in RST format?
Good question. It is.
I don't know.
I shouldn't think so. No, it's not.
Okay.
And oh, you don't want to do this.
No, you don't want to do that.
No. You just enter numbers.
Okay.
So Markdown actually is just a way of having smart formatting, simple to write, and with a decent rendering. But it's not fully uniformized. So Jupyter Notebook has its own ways of dealing with Markdown, which is not exactly the same as RST files, which will come to that later, session 3 or 4, I believe. But yes. So far, so good. Are you doing great with your notebooks, everyone? No? Yeah, okay. So what's the next? Oh, yes, maybe on Markdown side. So like I said, bold, italic, you can do both. You can write LaTeX. So if you're familiar with LaTeX, you can pretty much write down any type of LaTeX formula that you want to. No problem there. If you enter a URL, it will automatically render as something you can click on. And that's it. Like I said, there's many other powerful features with Markdown. It's, I will not say it is as powerful as LaTeX, but in terms of trade-off between simplicity and rendering, it's better than LaTeX. So you can not achieve the same high quality, but it takes much less time. Yeah.
I think you can also use HTML.
Yes, of course.
For people who know.
Yes. If you know how to do HTML, you can enter basic HTML. For instance, emphasize it's M, I believe.
Okay, so.
Yeah. If you enter something like this, I believe yes, but it should be rendered. So you can have some HTML tags, and if there are standard tags, that should be interpreted correctly. No problem there. Okay. We'll go back to my presentation. Yeah. So this is I'm doing a little bit of good practice in advance. Usually, when you write a Python file, it's considered a good practice. So when you're young, you don't want to comment anything. And as you grew old and start to realize you cannot even understand the code you wrote 6 months ago, you started to get that it can be good to leave some clues of what is happening there. And when you do this in a Python file, usually you have comments that are used to do this. But when you're on a notebook, it's much better, it's my opinion, to use the Markdown cells because it's more expressive. Formatting can be more adapted to what you want to say. And this is especially true for those with a kind of mathematical / computer science basic luggage, because most of the time you will want to write down a few equations here and there. And for this, there's nothing like a markdown LaTeX cell to be able to say what you want to do in the next cell. Yes, about markdowns, what last things? If you start something with a hash or several hashes, it will translate into the HTML tags hash1, hash2, hash3, etc., etc., etc. So this is something that you can use to be able to build a structure in your notebook. You see, for instance, this actually is a first level heading with one hash. This is a fourth, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's translated to hash4, hash5, etc., up to hash6. And so back to your new notebook. So if you want to create something, you've got shortcuts for this. And the shortcuts, if you want to make headings, are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. Perfect. So 1 will make this. And so first heading. And you see that if I make a markdown like this, and if I don't make any mistake, the rendering should be actually the same. So, but it's more in the spirit of a Jupyter notebook to writing like this. And of course, 2. And so on and so on and so on.
Just a remark, especially for people on the bridge, if you try this at home, probably your headings won't be numbered.
Yes.
I think that Fabien will come back to this later.
I will come back to this later, and I will disable this for now. Yes, it was a feature that you should not be able to see yet. Thanks. Okay, what's the next? What did I do? Oh, I hit the blackboard. Oh, I hit the blackboard by mistake. Okay, the code says why each code element of 2 parts, blah blah blah, input, execute, blah 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 blah. Okay. So now we go to the real stuff. The code cells. Okay, no problem. So this is a code cell. So if you're not in a code cell, for instance, imagine that I'm here and I wrote this, and you wanted to turn a cell into a code cell, it's Y. Y will convert it into a code cell. And this is where you write some codes. So and now you want to execute that. How do you do this? You can click on the small play icon there. It will execute the things. You can hit Control and Enter. It will execute. Go in command mode if you're not in command mode, and stay where you are. So you see here I'm in the edit mode. Control Enter. I go in command mode and I stay where I am. Sometimes you may want to execute something and go to the next cell. For this, it is Shift Enter. So if you do Shift Enter, you execute and you go to the next cell. So that with that, by doing Shift Enter, Shift Enter, Shift Enter, Shift Enter, you are able to execute step by step some lines of code. Last but not least, here if I do Shift Enter, okay, so bad example because it works. Sometimes you may want to execute something and then you want to add another things, and this is Alt Enter. So Alt Enter will execute and create a new cell in edit mode where you can do things, blah, 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 Alt Enter and Alt Enter, new cell. So this is a way to incrementally add new cells as you go. It can be useful, depends on your style. What is the rest? Yeah, so this was just examples. And we will now start a few things about the Python coding, so you can be prepared for the next time. I know I've got 5 minutes. The first things you need to understand is that one notebook is one unit, a Python unit. It's called a kernel or a namespace. And that means that things you execute in one cell have impact in what happens in other cells. Here, in one cell, I will execute x equal to 2. And the fact that x and 2 are the same thing is now available for all cells of the notebook. Here, y is equal to 3. And here, in that cell, x and y have not been defined, but they have been defined in the notebook, so you have access to them and you get the answer. Yeah. So whatever, so with that, things that don't work is you don't share variables or namespace between two distinct notebooks. Each notebook has its own space, and for beginners, you can assume that it's impossible to share things from one notebook to the other. For advanced users, you can do things, but yes.
Maybe you don't.
Kids, don't do this at home.
Not because you can, but you should.
Yeah. Yeah, another things, quick. I know I'm a bit ahead of time. Yes. You see that you've got a menu, and with a menu, you've got nice shortcuts to execute some things. For instance, cells, run all, it will execute sequentially all the cells of your notebook. Okay, so all things have been executed except that one, because that one is empty, so there is nothing to execute. You've got things to reboot your kernel and clear all the outputs. Yeah. Sometimes you went too far and you need to have a fresh restart of your notebook. You can restart and run all the cells. So you reboot and you execute all cells sequentially. You see that you can execute all cells that are above your current cell or below your current cell. So that can be very useful sometimes. And yes, I know I will run. Last things I want to know, so it's just very few steps about Python programming, so we'll be ready for the next part. Honestly, if you ever done any programming in any language, basic, Logo, no problem, very good language, Logo, MATLAB, of course, Julia, even C, you will not be lost with Python because the basic building blocks are the same as in everywhere. So you have if, then, for, while, no problem there, true, false, and of course print. And you can do, okay, name again Python workshop, print, blah, blah, blah. You can execute this. This is very important. There is one thing that is very specific to Python, however, is that in most languages, you use and to indicate where a given part of the code ends, and of a loop, and of if clause, and of a definition. Sometimes, like in JavaScript, you use curly brackets, so you can get lost much easier. And in Python, it does not exist. You never write and. Instead, what you use to define the scope of a definition, of a function, of a loop, is the indentation. And this is very important. It's almost the first thing you need to understand about Python. And just to conclude with small examples. So here, basically, I do a loop 0, 1, 2, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I can count today. And basically, you increment a counter and you print the value. Okay. Here, I do exactly the same thing, except so the text is exactly the same. It's just the position of a print that is different. And here, actually, so this is out of the loop. So I only print the last value. And so this is very fundamental. When you mess the indentation in any other language, it will be just less pretty or maybe less intuitive to read. In Python, if you mess the indentation, you mess your code. This is very vital. And even me, I think that 2 days ago, I messed up a thing just because I was one tab ahead or below of my return function. So it's very easy, even when you're used to use Python, to do that kind of mistake. But it's also kind of a nice feature because legibility is part of a language. it's not something you can skip because it's really a part of the language. Okay, last thing before we end the session, but I will invite you to go on the material that is available if you want to dive in, because you've got more examples of things to do and to install. Sometimes you do mistake and sometimes you will have some errors. So in Python, when you've got an error, you've got some indication of more or less up to 3.10 the error is, so you can see what was wrong. For instance, here I write something with I going from -3 to 2. I try to compute the inverse and to display it. So of course, at some point it breaks because I try to do a division by 0, but the Python tells me that the error is that I tried to divide something by 0, and it tells me at which line the error happened. Yeah, and in the next version of Python 3.10, you're supposed to know exactly where it is. So the next version should tell you, okay, actually it's there. But currently for 3.8, it's still not the case. And that's it. I just see if, yes, this one will be for Mathieu, I believe. So yes, thank you for attending this first session. And if we have a few last questions, like I said, don't hesitate to go into the notebook that is available on the website to know the rest of the things. It was things that are not necessary to be able to attend the next session, but that can make things easier for you. So don't hesitate to play.